Okay, so before we get started today, we're going to do a podcast with a landowner that we're planting trees on. And I have some video that I like to put up and show you what's going on the actual site itself before we sit down and interview the landowner. So we'll start with that, and then when we're done watching the video, we'll chat with the Mr. Getz, who is the person that owns the property here. So it is Earth Day, April 22nd, 2025, and we're here at Jim Getz's property down near Keewaydin, and we are planting trees on this nice day. So Joe Merlot is kind enough to use his tractor and his post hole digger to drill holes, and then we're following them up with some trees. So we're planting oak trees, and there's a bit of a deer from here, so we got to shelter every oak tree we plant. There's going to be roughly 4,000 trees put in here. All right. All right. So this is the Stewardship podcast sponsored by the Antrim Conservation District. I am Mike Meriwether. I'm the forester with the Conservation District and the podcast host. So today we're going to talk about some tree planting, a tree planting project that is going on down by Keewaydin. And with us today is Jim Getz. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. Great job.
Jim is the landowner who owns property down here that we are planting trees on. And just a little bit of background, we have about an 8-acre tree planting site, and it's pretty unique planting. I'll let Jim talk about it a little bit more, but it's fairly unique because of the number of species we're planting. Some of our traditional tree plantings have been just red pine planted in rows with a machine, or spruce planted in rows with a machine. So this one's a little bit different. We've got a dozen or more species that are being planted, everything from oak to some spruce, sycamore, catalpa trees, some basswood. There's some other things too that I can't even remember. Oh, ginkgo. So it's a pretty unique planting. So with that little background, I'll let Jim, maybe you can tell us what made you decide to plant trees, or maybe give us a little background on yourself first.
Well, yeah, Mike, I'd be glad to try to do that. Been coming up to this part of northern Michigan for since about 1965. When I was in high school, work brought me up here, and then I had a sister who bought a place on Elk Lake, 1968, I think, and my wife, who I didn't know at that time, had a family on Skeegamog Point. Her family had a place there.
You're a long-time resident.
Right, and originally from Lansing, East Lansing, and I'm originally from Saginaw, but now I have two sisters that live on the lake, and all four of them visit the lake. I have four sisters, and it's really been like home. Just been a gorgeous place, fantastic experience.
Yeah.
And trees, well,
so what made you decide to plant trees, I guess, on this property?
There were trees here, and I was working with a commercial forester many years ago, and we had a lot of ash on this land. And after walking with this forester for probably 4 or 5 years, we're walking it one year, he said, "This is the last year." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We won't buy your ash trees after this year because the emerald ash borer was killing them." And so I decided then to sell all the ash trees. And that, at the time, we had about 100 acres. And we had some mature stands of popple. And so I said, well, you should probably take those too. And then took the ash, the popple, and then we did what they call a TSI, timber stand improvement. And we had this giant field, been logged, and I decided that I always thought I wanted to do some farming. Tried corn.
So was this field in trees?
This field was mostly in trees.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Most of it's sort of scruffy.
So did you clear it and stump it?
Correct.
Wow.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes. And then we tried corn, tried winter wheat, tried hay. I mean, we tried lots of things, and we discovered that without fencing the entire, we would lose everything we planted to deer.
Yeah.
And
So this field's gone full circle.
well,
It's gone
is
from forest to farm back to forest now.
It's going back to forest. And
Oh, good.
My wife was never truly excited about removing the trees, all the trees. I think she understood the emerald ash borer and the ash trees, and she understood the timber stand improvement. But I really wanted to try growing some stuff. So that failed miserably. And now, to make her a little happier, and me a lot happier too, we decided we're just going to put it all back in and
Okay.
do a bit, maybe a little better job than what we had originally.
Okay. Well, good. So that's interesting. This was farmed at one time, and now it's we're actually, I don't know if they can see the trees in the background, but we do have a deer problem here. So when you're planting oak and basswood and some of the other species that deer prefer, we have to protect them. So if you can see the shelters in the background, we're using tree shelters to actually protect some of the most vulnerable trees. And then we're also planting some fruit trees, some apple and some crab apple. And we're using cages for those. So we're putting cages around the apple trees, tree shelters around the oak. And then we have some species that are not supposed to be eaten by deer, and we're going to find out.
Right. We're going to give them a try.
So they're not supposed to eat catalpa, sycamore. They don't like walnut to speak of. We have a few walnut planted. So we're going to have to monitor those pretty well. So I guess getting back to the actual decision to plant this, how did you come about just deciding I'm just going to plant this field?
Well, there's a little more history. The local cherry farmer gave me aerial photographs taken back in the 1950s, early 1950s. This was all in cherries. All in cherries.
Well, you know, that's funny because Mr. Merlot, he said this is a perfect cherry site. He said it really should be planted to cherries.
That's exactly what he told me.
But he was out here drilling holes for oak trees, and he goes, you know, Mike, this should be a cherry orchard. But anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
That's what he told me 20 plus years ago, too.
Yeah.
Okay. But my bride didn't want a cherry orchard. So I agreed with her on that. We never put it back into cherries.
Okay.
But we have photos, old aerial photographs, that this was all cherries. And these bigger pines you see around here, some of them are probably close to 70 years old, but they were planted or they were volunteers.
Yeah.
So this piece of land's gone full circle a couple times.
Okay. So when you decided to plant trees, did you have like a objective in mind, such as like wildlife habitat or timber production, or just aesthetics, or what was your objective of, or did you have one, a goal or objective?
Well, Mike, I think my goal was to take the suggestions that you gave me, because you've done this for a long time. You do it every day. And I have really never done it. I mean, I've tried since I've been up here. I planted an orchard to the south of us. And it was supposed to be a nursery orchard, but we had some issues with that.
For landscape trees, you mean, like?
Well, no, they were 60 different varieties of fruit trees.
Oh, okay.
I tried everything that could possibly thrive in this particular zone. And so we had walnuts, we had 3 or 4 different kinds of peach trees, we had pear trees, we had apple trees, you name it. And I stuck it in the ground and just
See what
tried to
happened?
see what happened.
Yeah. Well, when we originally talked, we talked about planting trees here, and you said that you wanted to plant hardwood trees. And like traditionally, like I spoke earlier, this site would probably have just been row planted with red pine. You know, for a lot of landowners say, I just want to plant trees. I don't care what they are.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to have trees on my property. What's the best tree to plant and walk away from? So red pine would fit that bill, where you could plant them. The deer aren't going to eat them. They grow fast. They have a market later in life. You know, they make treated lumber out of them. So a lot of people will just say, just plant the field to something that I don't have to worry about deer. But when our conversation, you talked about wanting to plant some different varieties of hardwood. So we had to address the deer problem. And
I'm really way happier with all the different varieties. I think I counted them up, might be over 20.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The
there's
different oaks, the different maples.
yeah, we put different kinds of oak. Incidentally, I'm glad you brought that up. We put red oak, pin oak, bur oak, and white oak are the 4 kinds of oak that we have planted here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and I know the white oak produce an acorn that is sweeter, and the deer just love them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned the other day, maybe one of the first early mornings you were here, you saw a few deer here.
Yeah, I think I counted 30 when I pulled in here the first day. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a problem. But we're going to try and deal with it. So
Right. And
you can grow oak. You know, you just have to shelter them for a few years,
Right.
and once they get up above the browse line, they'll take off. So.
You know, I think maybe somebody from the DNR told me years ago that cedar is almost a non-renewable resource in northern Michigan.
Cedar, very difficult to grow. Yeah, everything eats it from rabbits.
Exactly. Yes.
Deer.
Yeah. And but with your help, with the folks who've come here to help plant them all, and with the guards we've put on, with the ability to water them potentially if they need it, and you know the design you laid out gives us access to the trees, so we can do that.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think they're going to thrive, and you know, people may say, well, this guy's kind of old. Why is he planting all these trees? He's never going to see.
That was one of my questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
not that you're old, but I'm saying
I'm 76. I'm 76, and I hope that my children and grandchildren will see these become pretty old trees.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah.
If that happens, and you know, I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention to you yesterday, but several of the people that are working said, you know, if you want to come back and put your name on one of these, let's do that. Let's get some name tags and put names on these trees. So year after year, when you come back to see how things are going, you can look at your tree.
Yeah.
See how it's doing.
A lot of people that have planted trees for me will bring their kids back to they'll plant a tree like at your place here, and they'll go out because I young kids working for us, but
Sure.
so they'll come back,
Right.
20 years from now,
Sure.
and they'll remember they planted these
Yes.
trees, and they'll drive in here and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I planted these trees." So
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, it'd
But
even make it a tad more cool if we can have a plaque either near the tree on the ground or
yeah,
somehow and name on it and the whole 9 yards and maybe when they did it.
yeah.
I think that'd just be really cool.
So the one thing you did that's ahead of the curve as far as tree planting goes to get into kind of the reason tree plantings fail or succeed is that you had this disced up last year,
Yes.
and then it was planted to winter wheat or something.
Winter wheat and a little bit of another grass.
Just a ryegrass or
I
something.
think a rye.
So you got rid of the sod that was here. I'm assuming this
Correct.
was a sod field.
Yes, it was. And
So-
there's a gentleman who lives nearby who was anxious to plow it and plant it. And I told him, I said, Bill, I'll pay the cost of doing that. I'd be thrilled if you want to do it. And he would come up here and late in the evening, really early in the morning, more often late in the evening, and just watch all the deer come out of the woods and into this field.
Yeah.
And he counted 36 one evening, and I think I showed up when he was doing that. I just drove by and field and up to ask him. He said at least 9 big bucks,
Uh,
36.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, that's a deer. When you put that winter wheat in, it's a deer magnet.
right.
What
And-
it did do, it did prepare the site for tree planting. So getting rid of that sod,
Yep.
trees struggle with sod.
Right.
That has to be controlled in some way. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they plop a tree down in a sod field somewhere and hope it grows. Well, it has to compete with that sod for moisture,
Right.
and it's really difficult for a tree to get going. So here, these trees shouldn't have that kind of competition, and they should take off. And eventually, we may have to deal with the rye, maybe later this summer, or the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to spray around each tree. Initially, I wanted to spray the site before we planted it, but we haven't had the
Oh,
temperatures
it's been cold.
that allowed us to
Right.
spray, and
Mhm.
the wheat's not even really growing that good. So we had to make a decision to plant it, maybe spray it later. And so typically we would want to get rid of the winter wheat before we planted the trees. So there's no competition at all here. But
Well, the deer have been helping.
the deer have been helping
They
with that.
come in and mow this place pretty regularly.
They have been helping with that. Hopefully, maybe they'll continue to browse it back. So later this summer, we'll have to evaluate it. We'll either have to mow it, and we'll evaluate the competition here. If we mow it, maybe that'll be enough to kill the winter wheat. I suspect it'll keep coming, and if it's not too aggressive, it'll be fine. If it gets really aggressive this year, next year, we may have to address that. But with the shelters on the trees, it'll be easy to spray. We won't have to worry about killing trees with a herbicide. We'll use a real selective herbicide that just kills grass.
Right.
We won't use Roundup or something that
Right.
could endanger the trees. So I think that'll be an easy fix. So
Well, if we have failures, and I expect there to be some failures, we have next year and we have the year after that.
Yeah.
And
I suspect it'll be interesting to see, because I have not planted things like catalpa and sycamore in this area. We're a little bit north. They do grow here, obviously, but
right.
so it'll be interesting to see which trees thrive here. Some of these trees are going to do really well, and some of them might struggle. I'm not even sure about that. And your soil types are interesting. They change. These knobs over here
Right.
have gravelly, sandy,
Yes.
crappy
Yep.
soil, and then
Right.
as you go up the hill, it's a really good soil. So it's
And at the bottom, if we talked about the possibility of some yellow birch because it's more of a wet foot type
Yeah.
of soil.
so we get
And-
down towards the east.
Yep.
The actual field turns into more of a wetter soil,
Right.
and we'll have to deal with that maybe next year. We'll
Yeah,
find some
right.
plants that can grow
Yeah.
in the wetter soil.
Multi-year effort, and I think that we'll see the fruits of all this labor in about 50 years.
Well, I hope you enjoy them because I don't think I'm going to be here in 50 years. Maybe. So, all right. Well, good. Any other comments you want to make on your project here?
Well, maybe a funny one. I guess I was talking to a friend the other day who also thought I was a little late, a little long in the tooth to be planting trees.
Yeah.
And I just thought about this yesterday. And, none of us are getting out of here alive. That's not the way it works, right?
Right.
And that's true for trees, too. There's a lifespan for trees. And, they reach the end of that lifespan. Maybe they're harvested. Maybe they're lost to disease or a storm. But they start tiny, grow big, but they don't grow to the moon.
Right.
There's a limit, and like people, and I just thought about all of the similarities. Not all of us start out just perfectly straight. Okay, there's a few bends along the way. There's some storms. There's some tough winters. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think trees are a lot like people.
Yeah.
I generally really like people, and I think I just generally really like trees.
Okay. Well, just because you get older doesn't mean you can't plant a tree. So,
That's right. Absolutely.
If you can plant a tree and someday come over here and sit in the shade of that tree, then you've had a good life.
I am going to be pumped up about it.
So I like watching them grow. I actually like the smaller trees, and then you come back year after year and see them grow.
Yep.
And I've planted trees for 40 years, and I drive by a block of trees now that I'm like, holy smokes. I'm really getting older. Those trees really grew fast.
I remember, I don't think I never thought of my father as a gardener. He was a businessman, sort of made eyeglasses for a living, manufacturing. And, but our neighbor at home when I was little planted a row of pine trees in his backyard and budding our backyard. And he used, there was an aphid or something on some bug on the pine trees, and he sprayed them. And it turned out to be the wrong spray. Well, and he killed half of them at least. And one day, he and my dad were looking at his trees, and he was going to pull this one out. And I remember my dad saying to him, "Why don't you let me just try to nurse that one back?" I said, I think it'll live. And I was really shocked. But anyway, year after year, multiple times a year, my dad would go out and trim the dead branches, and he'd water it. And sure enough, I was gone for many years, and I came back and I looked at that tree. I noticed it, and it was taller and bigger and straighter and fuller than any other tree back there. So you just don't, you don't want to give up on trees. You don't want to give up on people. I mean, they both can have really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, maybe as a little kid, I just learned some lessons about trees that
That's a big commitment. I mean, it's a big investment for you. It's not cheap to plant trees anymore. We've got a lot of things going on. So I appreciate you taking the time and investing in it. So
well, I'm very excited to be able to do it. I really am.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing them grow.
Thank you.
Okay, so it is April 25th, 2025, and we just finished a very unique tree planting down by Keewaydin. The property's owned by Jim Getz, and we put in a variety of oak, red oak, pin oak, bur oak, and white oak. And we also planted some American chestnut and some hazelnut, a few walnuts, and some other varieties that I'll show you in a minute. So the trees were, we dug a post hole with the tractor. We used a post hole digger. Followed them up with the trees, and then we sheltered each tree because there's a lot of deer here. And that's what the shelters look like. On top of the shelters is bird netting that keeps the bluebirds out of the shelters and other birds that have a tendency to fall down in them for some reason. So it looks good. The tree should take off. We'll see. So I'm still here at Jim Getz's property, and I just talked about the tree shelters. And we also put in some apple trees. These are Northern Spy, and we only put in 10 or so. But again, we had to cage them to protect them from the deer, and we have to tree wrap them to protect them from meadow voles and mice and rabbits. So they're a little bit tricky to grow, but they should do pretty good. And I don't know if you can see the shelters way up there. There's also some crab apples, some mulberry, and some basswood that also have shelters on them similar to this. So this is an interesting tree planting, and it looks good. And so we're wrapping it up and hoping for rain. All these 3 turkeys in from across the field. Wish I had my blowgun with me.